In a world filled with mysteries and unexplained phenomena, sometimes the line between the natural and the supernatural becomes blurred. Today, we embark on a journey into the heart of an extraordinary tale. Where the realms of the living and the dead intertwine, our story begins with a chance encounter that would change everything. A journey marked by inexplicable occurrences, where the past reaches out from beyond the veil to touch the present. This story was shared by my friend Dharmendra Pandey, who resides in New Delhi, India. The series of events began in 2002 with me. After that, a soul connected to this incident became an integral part of my life. People might consider this nonsense, but it's true that as I write this answer, perhaps that soul is somewhere around here. It all started when, at the behest of my father, I began my mushroom export business for the first time. I chose to set up my business in the city of Jumri Tilaya in Kodarma, a district in Jharkhand state. Since the temperature there is slightly lower than the average temperature of Bihar and Jharkhand, I chose Kodarma for my mushroom business. I opened my office in a marketing complex in Jumri Tilaya. The series of events with me started almost 2 months after starting my business. I was living in a rented flat in Kodarma. One evening, I got delayed in closing my office because some people from Hazaribagh had come to meet me. I closed my office around 7:45 and gave the key to my watchman, then bought some boiled eggs from a shop. It was a chilly December night. Shops in small towns often close early in the evening during the winter season. Most of the shops there were already closed. I also lit a cigarette. As I was eating boiled eggs and smoking, heading towards my room, the distance from the market to my house was about 2 kilometers. Along the way, there was a deserted place where there were only forests on both sides of the road and about 300 meters long, 8-foot-high walls on both sides of the road, along with the forest. As I reached the middle of that 300-meter wall, suddenly someone called out to me. It was a girl's voice. "Listen." I was very surprised to hear that voice because there was no one behind me on the path I had taken. And then it was almost impossible for a woman or girl to be in that deserted place at such a late hour. That's why I considered that voice as my imagination, ignored it and moved forward. But now I had barely taken 25 steps when I heard the same voice again. "Listen." But this time the voice was very clear. It sounded like a 14-15-year-old girl. I estimated that the voice was coming from the other side of the wall towards the jungle. I felt something was wrong, so I didn't stop but kept moving forward. However, just after about 15 seconds, I heard the same voice again. But this time, the voice was very sharp and filled with anger. "Stop! I'm calling you!" The voice was coming from behind the wall next to me. I felt trapped. Without thinking, I started running. But what's this? It felt like someone had grabbed both my legs tightly from behind. I couldn't move my feet. I wanted to chant the Gayatri mantra, but I had eggs in my hand. I couldn't chant with eggs in my hand. I quickly threw the eggs and started chanting the Gayatri mantra. I must have chanted the mantra only a few times when slowly the grip on my legs began to loosen. I started running desperately towards my room. Then I stopped near the door of my house. I couldn't sleep at all that night, remembering the incident. It felt like someone's eyes were continuously staring at me throughout the night, sometimes from the window and sometimes from the lamp. Anyway, the next morning, after bathing and other morning rituals, I was feeling completely refreshed. When the incident from the previous night came to mind, I considered it as my imagination, shook my head and pushed it out of my mind. But I was completely wrong. I later found out that that night marked the beginning of an incident that would never end for me. The next day, I spent all my time in my office with my clients. It was a very busy day. I finished my work on time in the evening. I gave the key to my watchman and left for home. It was around 6:30 in the evening. It was quite cold. The temperature must have been around 4 degrees. Along with darkness, there was also fog. I was walking while smoking in my own tune. I wasn't even thinking about the incident from the night before. But as soon as I reached the place where the incident had happened the previous night, suddenly, in the 100th part of a second, a lightning flashed before my eyes, and then for a few moments, it became completely dark. After about 5 seconds, when I regained my composure, suddenly I felt a rush of very hot air passing by me, as if someone had opened a giant blower in front of me. Within a minute, I started feeling sweat dripping from my forehead. But why did my whole body suddenly feel lighter, as if someone was carrying me away in the air? Anyway, since that day, whenever I passed through that road, I never felt any such thing again. But there were some changes happening within me. Since that day, the tasks that had been stuck for a few days or couldn't be completed started getting done. Wherever I sat, me and the people around me started feeling a strange fragrance, as if we were sitting in a garden of jasmine or chamomile. Now, I always felt as if someone was with me. The days passed somehow, but as soon as it got dark, I started feeling scared of someone being with me. Because of this fear, I had taken William 10 sleeping pills from a friend who owned a pharmacy. Whenever I felt too scared, I would take a pill, close my eyes, and fall unconscious in a few minutes. The effect of the sleeping pills was such that, even after waking up, I felt like I'd only slept for 10 minutes, but when I looked at the clock, I realized that I had been sleeping for 8-10 hours after selling horses. Since my work was increasing, sometimes I had to stop clients coming from outside. So considering my needs, I changed my office. I had rented another flat with 2 more rooms from the market. That day, I had shifted to the flat. My flat was on the ground floor. Although there was only one main gate to enter the house, the stairs of the upper floors came out from the side, and the door of my flat was to the left as soon as you entered through the main gate. There were 2 rooms, a courtyard, and a kitchen. Since I didn't have much stuff, I had kept most of my belongings in the next room. The other room was almost empty. The kitchen had almost all the necessary items because cooking and eating had become both my hobby and necessity. I was extremely tired from working in the office and shifting houses that day, so I decided not to cook today. When returning from the office, I had eaten some samosas and eggs, so after coming home, I heated some milk and came to my bed. There were 2 3x6 beds pushed together. It must have been a room of 12-15. Just above my bed was a 4x4 window. About 6 feet away from my bed on the opposite wall was a rack or wardrobe where I had arranged my audio cassettes, a deck, DVDs were not common then, etc., around 100 items. I have always been fond of literature, so there were also a few books, about 10 or 12, on that rack, some by Premchand, some by Sharachand, and some other books like Gunahon Kadevta and Chitralekha were also kept in the lower compartment of that rack. There was no electricity. That's why I had placed a large-sized candle about 4 feet away to the left of my bed. The milk was very hot, so I put it under my bed. There was no center table or any other table. I had taken the sleeping pill while heating the milk. I didn't realize when I fell asleep while waiting for the milk to cool down. Suddenly I felt like I was suffocating. I was having trouble breathing. I opened my eyes in a daze. What I saw shocked me. Bright flames were shooting out of the entire rack. The plastic of the cassettes was melting, dripping down from the rack to the floor below, where it was burning. All the books were burning with crackling sounds. The whole room was filled with fire and smoke, but the candle was still there where I had placed it a while ago, burning. I jumped out of bed and quickly opened the windows and doors. Like a madman, I brought water from the bathroom to extinguish the fire. I managed to put out the fire within 5 minutes, but it took half an hour for the smoke to clear. The biggest question was, how did the fire start? There was no electricity. The candle was 6 feet away from the rack. There was nothing else around the rack. The only thing in the entire room for fire or light was the candle, which was still burning on the floor where I had placed it a while ago. My head was spinning with thoughts. I spent the whole night trying to find the answer to how the fire started. It felt like someone was trying to warn me with all this, or providing evidence of their existence, because I had no injuries, burns, or harm on my body. But the incident had happened. Time passed, but I didn't talk to anyone about these things. Every time I thought of telling my people, especially my mother, who was very religious, about this, but who knew which illusion it was that as soon as morning came, I almost forgot the incidents of the night. About 15 days after this incident, one morning, Father called. He was calling me to Patna for some urgent work. There was the Hatia Patna Express at 2:30 in the afternoon. I handed the office keys to my watchman and instructed him to open the office on time the next day, and then I came to my flat. I'd gone to Patna just for a day, but I had to stay for 3 days. On the 4th day, around noon, I caught the Patna Hatia Superfast and reached my flat at around 2:30 in the afternoon. As I was about to knock on the main gate, I saw that it was open, and my landlady, her daughter, and her son were trying to break the lock of my flat. Seeing this, my head spun. I was also getting angry because of their actions. Before I could say anything, their attention was already on me. The landlady scolded me, almost shouting, asking why I wanted to kill all those people. I couldn't understand what she meant. Before I could ask anything, a sharp whiff of LPG gas hit my nose. The smell of gas was coming from inside my flat. The landlady and others had felt the strong smell of gas just 5 minutes before I arrived. Since the courtyard was open, the smell of gas was directly reaching their house. My flat was locked, so to avoid any mishap, they were trying to break the lock to see where the smell was coming from and fix it. I quickly opened the lock and rushed towards the kitchen. The smell was coming from inside the kitchen. I opened the kitchen lock too, and we all went inside. I could not believe what we saw inside. Both burners of the gas stove were on, and the regulator of the cylinder below was also on. The gas was coming out very fast because of this. Anyway, I first turned off both burners and the regulator. Now everyone was aware of the danger. But the question was, even though the locks of the flat and the kitchen were closed, how were the knobs of the burners and regulator turned on? And if I had forgotten to turn them off while leaving for Patna, the gas smell would have started 4 days ago. How did it start? Just 5 minutes before my arrival. Within a month, a third incident like this had happened to me. Now I was really scared. Now I couldn't dare to sleep alone at night. I decided that I would keep someone with me now. After much consideration, I found a distant nephew who must have been around 13, 14 years old. He lived in the village. I talked to his mother and she agreed to send him to me. I had promised to give him a fixed amount every month. He arrived on the 3rd day. I had spent these 2 nights awake. Throughout the night, I felt like someone was around me, and there were various smells coming from around me. The day my nephew came, I took him to the market and bought him some clothes and other things. We had dinner at night and went to bed. Since there was electricity, I played my favorite Ghazal Cassetti and put the deck on auto reverse mode. That night, I hadn't taken any sleeping pills. That's why sleep wasn't coming to me either. The arrival of the spring season had occurred, and the cold was decreasing, so intentionally, I left the window open that night. I remembered being awake until midnight. After that, I don't know when I fell asleep. Suddenly, in my sleep, I felt a heavy weight on my body, on my waist. Before I could properly open my eyes, someone's hands had forcefully pressed both my wrists firmly onto the bed. My wrists were pressed so strongly that I couldn't even move my hands. I could feel the sensation of something sharp, like nails, digging into both my wrists. But my entire body, except for my neck, was completely jammed. The window was in front of me. The sound of birds chirping from outside was clearly audible. I could also hear the music playing on my deck. I turned my neck to see, and my nephew was sleeping nearby. I could feel everything, I just couldn't move, and the thing sitting on my body and pressing my wrists wasn't visible to me. But I felt that the room was filled with the strong fragrance of bellflowers. In that state, I tried to struggle with that thing for almost half a minute. In the same condition, I had to surrender to God again and started mentally reciting the Gayatri mantra. Initially, the pressure on my wrists and the upper body increased, but then gradually, the pressure on my wrists and back reduced, and within a few moments, I freed myself from the grip of that thing. I almost jumped out of bed and turned on the light bulb switch. But what's this? There was nothing in the room. I bent down to look under the bed. There was nothing there either. And since the room was closed from the inside, there was no possibility of anyone going out of the room. The clock showed the time as 4:35 in the morning. I woke up my nephew. I thought maybe he had done something or seen something or felt something. He got up rubbing his eyes and sat down. I asked him if he had seen anything. He said, "How would I know? I was fast asleep." He screamed, looking at me. He pointed towards my wrists and said, "Uncle, how are you bleeding from your hands?" Now it was my turn to be shocked. When I looked at my hands, I started trembling with fear. Where I had felt the prick of nails, drops of blood were dripping from both wrists onto the floor. Seeing my cut wrists, the blood flowing from them, and thinking about the cause of the cuts, I felt dizzy for a moment and sat down on the bed with a thud. Fear and astonishment prevented me from uttering a word. My entire body was becoming wet with sweat. Shandan, my nephew, cleaned my wrists with water, and since there was no antibiotic to apply on my hands, I sprayed perfume from a bottle kept nearby on the cut area, and then applied boraline cream. Upon careful examination, it was found that there were deep wounds of approximately half a centimeter in the same place on both wrists. Now I understood that I had fallen into some deep paranormal conspiracy or trap. I had deceived myself for 2 months by ignoring that thing, but now ignoring meant neglecting my life. I decided to tell my mother everything from start to finish. The same day, when I reached the office, I became so busy with my work that I couldn't talk to my mother again. Or if I say that someone made me forget by manipulating my mind, it wouldn't be an exaggeration. And it was fortunate that for the next 1 week, no such incident occurred, and I became carefree and relaxed once again. About 10 days after that incident, a client named Upendra Yadav from Jahanabad, Bihar, came to me to receive training and to make some purchases from me. I didn't have some of the items he needed. The possibility of those items reaching me from Ranchi the next morning was there. I told him to stay at my flat that night and leave with the items the next day. He agreed, and after returning from the office, we all cooked dinner together and then sat down to eat. Since I had pushed the 2 beds together, we all decided to sleep together on one bed. Upendra and I talked late into the night. I couldn't remember when I fell asleep. I was sleeping deeply due to the exhaustion of the day, when suddenly Upendra shook me awake, almost screaming. He was panting out of fear. I lit a candle and asked what happened. He was so scared and screaming. Why? Trembling, he told me that there was a ghost in the room and that ghost had controlled him for a few moments. Before I could ask him anything, my gaze fell on his wrists. There were marks of cuts on his wrists, just like mine, and blood was flowing from there too. When I asked him the whole story, he told me exactly what had happened with him 10 days ago from that night. I was speechless. I trembled with disbelief and astonishment. It was exactly 4:35 in the morning at that time. He said that he often sleeps on the platforms made in his fields at night, where there is a cemetery nearby, but he never feels afraid there or has any such incident with him. But here in this room, such a terrifying incident has happened. There must be some ghost's curse here. I tried very hard to stop him, but Upendra left my flat immediately, saying that it is better to spend the rest of the time at the railway station. Upendra had already left, and now water had risen above my head too. I couldn't sit still anymore. I called my mother and told her everything. My mother said she was coming to me by the afternoon train. My mother came and performed some rituals and prayers. She said that there is something wrong buried under the ground of this house. I should vacate this house. I told this to my landlord. He outright denied the possibility of anything my mother had said happening. He told me that they had conducted a thorough puja of the house with their priest before constructing it, and the priest had blessed the foundation of the house. Therefore, no spirit could possibly enter there. But for some reason, I was not satisfied with his explanation. Seeing my fear, he said he would talk to the priest. He was going to his village. His priest had asked him to bring some cloth from me. I had given him one of my handkerchiefs. A few days later, the landlady returned from the village and invited me to meet her. Upon meeting, the landlady told me that she had talked to her guru. When the landlady repeated to me what her guru had told her, I was completely taken aback. She told me that there is a shadow of a ghost on me, who is a girl. The landlady's house, the girl had died at a very young age in an accident. Since then, she had been trying to come to me, but perhaps due to my young age or some other reason, she couldn't come to me. Now the right time had come for her to come to me, so she came to me. However, even though she was not entirely convinced by her guru's words because I was a modern thinker, after the incidents that had been happening with me continuously for the past 2 months, it could not be denied that there was some truth in the landlady's words. Even after that, I stayed in that house for 4 months, but miraculously, no major incident happened to me afterward. Yes, there was a noticeable difference. My worries were starting to disappear completely. Whenever I thought about anything or desired anything, it would come true. I also noticed that the people who weren't good with me started to maintain a good relationship with me. However, small incidents started to occur, such as hearing the same song playing from the deck when I thought about it, repeatedly smelling the fragrance of the lilies, feeling cold around me when it was too hot, and starting to sweat in the cold, etc. Time passed. After a few days, due to China, the price of mushrooms in the international market dropped by more than half. All my mushrooms were exported to America. I tried hard to overcome that situation, but couldn't. And in the end, I had to shut down that business and return to Patna. In Patna, I got a job in a company that manufactures computers. Within a year, I was responsible for sales in the entire state of Bihar. I was working very hard. The company provided me with a car and a driver. I used to travel around the entire state in that car for marketing purposes. Once I reached the office after a 3-day holiday. That day, I had to leave for a week-long business trip. Upon reaching there, I saw the car parked outside the office and a man was worshiping it with flowers, vermilion, coconut, and lemon, etc. Upon asking, I found out that the previous driver had quit his job, so a new driver had come. It was found out from the admin head that the new driver wanted to perform a puja before going out for the first time, so he was allowed to perform the puja. I silently watched him perform the puja. He seemed very mysterious. Anyway, after the puja, when he came to know about me, he greeted me very respectfully. The journey began. I was sitting on the front seat with the driver. As usual, I started talking to him about some things. After an hour's journey, I stopped the car at a roadside eatery, and we had food. After eating, the journey started again, and the conversation started once again. While talking, I asked him about the reason for performing the puja in that manner. He told me that his elder brother had died 8 months ago. Now his elder brother's soul stays with him and keeps him informed about things from time to time. After that, he always performs a puja before starting any new work on his elder brother's advice. I was amazed to hear this. How could he communicate with his brother when he had passed away? I told him about my doubt. Upon hearing this, what he told me surprised me a lot. He told me that his brother's soul has come upon his body and stays with him every moment. Hearing this, and thinking that his brother's soul might still be in this car with me, a shiver ran down my spine. I remained silent for a while. Suddenly, memories of the Koderma incident also came fresh into my mind, and for some reason, I wanted to mention it to him. I had just said to him that something similar had happened to me a few years ago, and a soul had also done something similar to me. As soon as he heard this, he spoke up in a strange and terrifying voice. "We all know." He started speaking in the Magahi language. Suddenly, his voice, his language, and the tone with which he addressed me completely changed. I noticed that his face had suddenly stiffened, his eyes had turned red, and due to anger, saliva was coming out of his mouth as he spoke. He told me that he was the brother of the driver, and what would I tell him? He knows everything about the incident that happened to me. Then, without me saying anything, he himself started narrating each and every incident that happened to me in Koderma, one after the other, in detail. It seemed as if he was a witness to every event that happened to me in Koderma. I was sweating due to fear and disbelief. He described each and every incident which had happened a year ago with me, in detail. I couldn't believe my eyes and ears that such a thing could happen. Suddenly, he told me that the soul is of a 14-year-old girl, and she is still sitting on the rear seat of the car. Thinking that I am currently sitting with two paranormal forces, it felt like my heart would stop beating. Then, when I somehow asked him in fear if he could tell me who this girl was, he said that the girl is the sister of one of my friends. When I used to live in my hometown and was studying in the 10th grade, she loved me very much. Despite her countless efforts, she couldn't express her feelings to me, nor did I ever pay attention to her feelings. Meanwhile, when I returned to Patna due to some family reason, she made a lot of effort to establish contact with me. However, when she couldn't succeed, she went to a tantric upon someone's suggestion. That tantric, by performing black magic, killed her, and since then her soul had been wandering. Eventually, she succeeded in contacting me in Koderma. It was quite surprising. The moment she mentioned the name of my friend, I remembered his name, and also recalled that he had a younger sister. Whenever I visited my friend, she used to stare at me, but for me, my friend's sisters were like my sisters, so I never thought anything about that girl. I didn't even know that she loved me. The way the driver's brother, without knowing anything about me in our first meeting, had told me every detail about me, made me doubt anything after knowing him. In the end, the so-called soul of the driver's brother told me that that girl's soul still loves me very much, and she will never harm me until I try to distance myself from her. If I try to distance myself from her, then it will be very difficult for me. As soon as these things ended, my driver became completely normal and started talking fluently again, just like he was talking to me a few minutes ago. After this incident, I left my 7-day journey in just 2 days in between and returned. I was feeling extremely uncomfortable with the driver because of fear. I couldn't sleep on both nights spent with him. Then, I managed to get rid of the driver with some excuse. A few days later, I went to my hometown to meet my friend. I wanted to know about his sister. When I met him, I came to know that what the soul of the driver's brother had told me was absolutely true. After a year of my visit to Patna, my friend's sister's dead body was found inside a jungle 2 kilometers away from her house. It's been about 17 years since that incident happened. Since then, I have never made any attempt to distance myself from her. She has always been with me, helped me, and protected me. I feel good knowing that she is with me. I respect the love that even after her death she has for me. She still makes me feel her presence by doing some activities with me every day.